barista at your local Starbucks doesn't know your name. Neither does your neighbor. You've lived in the same apartment building for 3 years and can't remember if the guy in 4B is named Derek or Dennis. Your dentist asked how your kids were doing last week. You don't have kids. Welcome to modern American life, where you can be completely alone in a crowd of 4 million people. But here's what the real estate industrial complex won't tell you. There are still places in America where the hardware store owner asks about your mother's hip surgery, where the librarian remembers which authors you like, where you can't buy beer at the gas station without someone asking why you missed the potluck last Thursday. These towns still exist. They're affordable, they're functional, and yes, everyone will absolutely know your name, also your business, and your dental history, and that thing you did in 2019 that you'd rather forget. We found 8 American towns where anonymity isn't just rare, it's physically impossible, where community isn't a marketing term, it's an inescapable fact of daily life. These aren't suburban developments with forced neighborhood barbecues. These are places where social networks predate social media by 150 years, where your reputation matters more than your resume, and where the phrase "mind your own business" is considered a hostile act. We're counting down from towns where people wave on Main Street to a place where the postmaster is your cousin and also knows you're 3 days late on your water bill. From communities where you'll be welcomed as a newcomer to locations where your great-grandchildren will still be considered not from here. The populations get smaller, the scrutiny gets heavier, and by the end, you'll either be packing your bags for a place where everyone cares or renewing your lease in that anonymous apartment complex where Dennis and 4B still won't make eye contact. Should we see what small-town America actually looks like when the welcome wagon comes with a side of 24/7 surveillance? Let's find out. Location number 8, Beaufort, South Carolina, the gateway town. We're starting in Beaufort, South Carolina, population 13,600, where Spanish moss hangs from live oaks like nature's privacy curtains, and the Beaufort River moves so slowly it looks like it's contemplating retirement. This is the entry point to small town intimacy, the place where you can test the waters of being known without fully committing to being transparent. Beaufort gives you something most American towns abandoned decades ago, a walkable, historic downtown where the same faces appear in rotation. The woman at the coffee shop on Bay Street will remember your order by the 3rd visit. The bookstore owner will set aside titles he thinks you'll like. The server at Saltus River Grill will ask how your week was and actually wait for the answer. It's not suffocating, it's just pleasant, which makes it the perfect starter dose. Here's the pivot. Beaufort pulled off something most southern towns can't claim. It stayed functional. While historic downtowns across the region became ghost districts with antique stores nobody visits, Beaufort maintained actual businesses where actual locals shop. According to the Beaufort Regional Chamber of Commerce, the downtown corridor has a 94% occupancy rate. People live here year-round. The preservation isn't performative. The median home price sits at $340,000 according to Zillow data from December 2024, which sounds steep until you remember that buys you a historic home where your neighbors will check on you during hurricanes and you'll never eat Thanksgiving dinner alone unless you specifically request solitude. The cost of living index is 102, just 2% above the national average. You're paying a 2% premium to know the name of the person who fixes your plumbing and have them show up when they say they will. Beaufort's social fabric operates on what locals call porch culture. Front porches aren't decorative, they're social infrastructure. Sitting on your porch means you're available for conversation. Not sitting on your porch when you normally would triggers welfare checks. One local described it perfectly. In Beaufort, your front porch is your Facebook status update. Everyone knows if you're home, if you're okay, and if you need anything. It's community surveillance that actually feels like care. The town runs on 150 years of overlapping family trees and newcomers who've been here less than 20 years. But here's what separates Beaufort from the towns coming later on this list. You can still achieve privacy when you need it. You can skip the farmer's market without explaining why. You can have a bad day without the whole town diagnosing your problems. The recognition is optional until you make it permanent. Picture this. Saturday morning in downtown Beaufort. You walk to Common Ground Coffee for your usual order. The barista sees you coming and starts making it before you reach the counter. You grab a table outside, watch the river, wave at 3 people you recognize from the hardware store, the library, and that thing at the park last month. Your phone stays in your pocket because the entertainment is watching Mrs. Patterson argue with her husband about which antique store to hit first. You realize you haven't felt lonely in 6 weeks, and you're not entirely sure when that shifted. The trade-off here is subtle. You're not sacrificing much except the ability to be a complete mystery. Job market is limited unless you're in tourism, healthcare, or military-adjacent work, thanks to nearby Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort and Paris Island. According to Bureau of Labor Statistics data, the unemployment rate hovers around 3.2%, but median household income is $56,400, which is 18% below the national median. You'll know everyone's name. You might just make less money while doing it. From Beaufort, we're heading north and west. If you thought friendly shopkeepers were intense, wait until we get to a town where the winter population is so small that everyone knows when you leave for vacation. Location number 7, Red Lodge, Montana, the seasonal family. Red Lodge, Montana sits at 5,555 feet elevation with a population of 2,300 people who've committed to living somewhere that snow is not a weather event but a geological era. This is the Northern Rockies, where winter lasts from October to May, and the Beartooth Highway, the only road connecting Red Lodge to Yellowstone, closes for 7 months because even the snowplows gave up. Here's what makes Red Lodge different from Beaufort's gentle familiarity. Seasonality creates forced intimacy. Summer population swells to around 10,000 with tourists heading to Yellowstone. Winter population drops to the 2,300 people who chose to stay when reasonable people left. Those 2,300 know each other, not socially, structurally. Because in a town where the nearest hospital is 60 miles away in Billings and a blizzard can shut down roads for 3 days, your neighbors aren't a social nicety, they're survival infrastructure. The social contract here is explicit. You know your neighbors because you might need them to dig you out, jumpstart your truck at negative 20 degrees, or split a Costco run to Billings because driving 120 miles round trip alone is wasteful. According to the Carbon County Chamber of Commerce, Red Lodge maintains 43 active community organizations for 2,300 people. That's one organization for every 53 residents. You will join something: book club, search and rescue, historical society, volunteer fire department. Participation isn't optional if you want to be part of the winter crew. Median home price is $548,000 according to Redfin data from late 2024, which seems outrageous until you realize you're buying into a town that's been discovered by Bozeman spillover wealth and remote workers who want ski access without Aspen prices. Homes sit on the market for an average of 43 days. The cost of living index is 112, driven almost entirely by housing costs. Everything else, utilities, groceries, healthcare, runs below or at national average because this is still Montana and nobody's paying $8 for artisanal toast. The Red Lodge social network operates through 3 primary nodes: the coffee shops, Babcock and Miles being the main hub where locals congregate from 6 to 9 a.m. before the tourists wake up; the breweries, particularly Red Lodge Ales Brewing Company, where the community bulletin board is more reliable than the local newspaper; and the winter festivals, especially the March Winter Carnival that's been running since 1950 and functions as the town's social registry. If you're not at Winter Carnival, people assume you've either died or moved. One realtor told us off the record, newcomers think they're buying a ski town. What they're actually buying is a small community that happens to have skiing. If you're not willing to shovel Mrs. Henderson's driveway when she's recovering from surgery, you'll never really live here. You'll just own property here. Fun fact, Red Lodge was a coal mining town that peaked at 5,000 residents in the 1910s. When the mines closed in the 1950s, the population crashed. The town survived by pivoting to tourism and skiing, but the intimacy comes from collective near-death experience. Everyone here is descended from people who stayed when leaving made more sense. That creates a specific kind of tribalism. The job market is tourism, healthcare, or remote work. According to Montana Department of Labor statistics, the median household income is $61,200, slightly below the national median. Unemployment sits at 2.8% because there simply aren't that many jobs to be unemployed from. You work at the ski resort, you work in hospitality, you work remotely, or you're retired. Those are the options. Picture this: February in Red Lodge. It's 11 degrees outside. You walk into Babcock and Miles at 7 a.m. and 6 people say your name before you reach the counter. Someone asks if you're still planning to drive to Billings on Thursday because they need a Costco run and gas is easier to split. Another person mentions they saw your kitchen light on at 2 a.m. last week and wants to make sure you're sleeping okay. The barista knows you've switched from regular to decaf because your doctor mentioned it at book club. You realize you haven't been truly alone in 4 months and you're not sure if that's comforting or claustrophobic. The trade-off is weather and economics. Winters are brutal, genuinely isolating in ways that test mental health. The nearest major medical facility is an hour away on good roads, longer in winter. You're trading urban anonymity for mountain community, but the mountain doesn't care about your mental health and the community can't fix a compound fracture. If Red Lodge felt like a tight circle of winter survivors, our next town makes that look spacious. We're heading to a Minnesota college town where everyone knows the town history better than their own family trees. Location number 6, Northfield, Minnesota. The Civic Pride Network. Northfield, Minnesota, population 20,600, sits 40 miles south of Minneapolis-St. Paul, close enough to access urban amenities, far enough to maintain its own identity. This is a college town, home to both Carleton College and St. Olaf College, which means 6,000 of those 20,600 residents are students who cycle in and out every 4 years. The remaining 14,600 permanent residents have built their entire civic identity around one historical event, and they will never let you forget it. On September 7th, 1876, the James Younger gang attempted to rob the First National Bank of Northfield. The townspeople fought back. 2 gang members died in the street. The rest fled. Jesse James escaped, but the town captured 3 of the Younger brothers. Northfield has been dining out on this story for 148 years. Every September, the town reenacts the raid during the defeat of Jesse James Days Festival. Every business on Division Street has some plaque or historical marker referencing it. The community identity is literally built on collective violence against famous outlaws. Here's why that matters. Northfield doesn't just remember history, it weaponizes it as social cohesion. Everyone who lives here knows the raid story. Newcomers learn it within the first month, or they're marked as outsiders. Local businesses reference it constantly. The bank that was robbed still operates on the same corner. The bullet holes are preserved behind glass. This is a town that turned a traumatic event into permanent community mythology, and participation in that mythology determines social belonging. The median home price is $362,000 according to Zillow data from December 2024. Reasonable for a Twin Cities exurb with 2 prestigious liberal arts colleges. Days on market average 38 days, indicating healthy demand. The cost of living index is 104, just 4% above national average, driven primarily by housing. The job market here is diversified in ways most small towns can't claim. Healthcare at Northfield Hospital, education at the colleges, manufacturing at Malto Meals headquarters, and retail serving both locals and students. The social fabric operates through what locals call overlap culture. Your kid's soccer coach also sits on the city council. The person who teaches pottery at the community arts center is married to the brewery owner. The librarian plays violin in the community orchestra. According to the Northfield Arts Guild, 37% of permanent residents participate in at least one community arts or civic organization. You can't swing a historically accurate 1876 rifle without hitting someone who's involved in 3 different community groups. One local put it perfectly. In Northfield, you don't move here for privacy. You move here because you want to matter. Everyone knows if you showed up at the food co-op fundraiser, if you voted in the school board election, if you skipped the Jesse James reenactment. Your civic participation is your social credit score. The college-town dynamic creates an interesting split. There's permanent Northfield, the 14,600 year-round residents who run everything and maintain institutional memory. Then there's temporary Northfield, the 6,000 students who provide economic vitality but never quite integrate. Townies can spot a Carleton student from 3 blocks away and will treat them with polite condescension. They're here for 4 years. One business owner told us, "We're here forever." Big difference. Picture this. Saturday morning at the Northfield Farmers Market on the Riverwalk. You're buying tomatoes from the same vendor you've bought from for 3 years. She asks how your kitchen renovation is going because her husband's cousin did the permits at City Hall. The woman behind you in line is your daughter's piano teacher and mentions the recital is next week. You haven't forgotten, right? Someone taps your shoulder. It's the guy from book club who wants to remind you about the city council meeting Tuesday night, where they're voting on the new bike lane proposal and your attendance is expected because you mentioned supporting it at the brewery last month. You realize that your opinions have become public record, and backtracking would require a formal announcement. The trade-off here is college town economics and cultural expectations. Median household income is $76,400, 7% above the national median, boosted by dual-income professional families and college employment. But housing stock is limited because the colleges consume real estate for student housing, and landlords prefer students who pay 12 months of rent for 9 months of occupancy. According to the Northfield Housing and Redevelopment Authority, rental vacancy is 2.1%, meaning competition is fierce. The cultural expectation is civic engagement. You're not just allowed to have opinions about local issues, you're required to have them and defend them at public meetings, festivals, and anywhere else the community gathers. Neutrality reads as apathy. Apathy reads as rejection. You'll know everyone's name and their position on the bike lane proposal, the school curriculum debate, and whether the Jesse James Days Festival needs a bigger budget. At least in Northfield, you can still commute to Minneapolis if you need anonymity for a day. Our next stop doesn't have that option. We're heading to the high desert desert of New Mexico where the person serving your breakfast burrito might also be writing your parking tickets. Location number 5, Silver City, New Mexico, the overlap economy. Silver City, New Mexico, population 9,400, sits at 5,900 feet in the Gila National Forest, where the high desert meets Ponderosa Pine, and the nearest major city, Tucson, is a 3-hour drive through landscapes that look like God got bored and started experimenting with different textures. This is old copper mining country that died, resurrected as an arts colony, and now operates as a hybrid economy where your barista is probably also a sculptor, a city council member, and someone's organic farming consultant. The defining characteristic of Silver City is role overlap. In bigger towns, people have jobs. In Silver City, people have portfolios. The waitress at the Buckhorn Saloon also teaches yoga and serves on the Historic Preservation Commission. The guy who runs the hardware store plays bass in 2 different bands and writes grants for the local food bank. According to the Silver City Main Street Project, 63% of small business owners in the historic district hold multiple jobs or community roles simultaneously. You don't just know people here, you know all their jobs, side hustles, and volunteer commitments. This creates a specific social dynamic, total transparency through economic necessity. In a town of 9,400, where the job market consists of Western New Mexico University, the regional hospital, tourism, and whatever you can invent for yourself, everyone's scrambling to make it work. That scrambling is visible. You know who's struggling because they just took a 3rd gig. You know who's thriving because they cut back to 2. Your economic status isn't private, it's observable data. Median home price is $229,000 according to Zillow data from December 2024. Affordable by almost any standard and absolutely shocking for anyone escaping California or Colorado. Days on market average 76 days, indicating slower movement but stable demand. The cost of living index is 88, 12% below the national average, driven by housing and the fact that nobody here is paying for premium anything. You shop at the food basket, you eat at local diners, and your entertainment is hiking, which is free. The social infrastructure operates through 3 overlapping networks. The arts community centered around galleries on Bullard Street and the monthly art crawl that draws the entire town. The outdoor community built around access to the Gila Wilderness, the nation's first designated wilderness area where trail maintenance and search and rescue create mandatory cooperation. And the political community where local government meetings feel like family arguments because everyone involved actually knows each other's families. One realtor told us, Silver City attracts 2 types, retirees who want affordable mountain living and young people who think they can make art and survive. The retirees have pensions. The young people have 3 jobs. Both groups end up knowing each other because there's only 4 restaurants and everyone eats out on Friday nights. Fun fact, Silver City was Billy the Kid's childhood home. The town celebrates this with a Billy the Kid festival every August because apparently every small American town needs to mythologize its relationship with outlaws. The difference here is that nobody's pretending Billy the Kid was a hero. They just acknowledge that he grew up here, probably shoplifted from the general store, and left before becoming famous. It's refreshingly honest mythology. The job market is arts, education, healthcare, or tourism. According to Bureau of Labor Statistics data, median household income is $38,200, 43% below the national median. Unemployment hovers around 4.8%. You will make less money here. That's not a risk, that's a guarantee. The question is whether knowing your community and living in stunning landscape compensates for the financial hit. Picture this, Thursday evening at the Palace Hotel bar on Broadway. You're having a beer and the bartender, who's also the owner, mentions that she saw your letter to the editor in the Silver City Daily Press about the water rights issue. The person next to you overhears, introduces himself as the water commissioner, and wants to debate your position right now at the bar with witnesses. The woman on the other side is your pottery instructor, and she's enjoying this immensely because she's also on the planning commission and this conflict has been brewing for months. You realize that having an opinion here doesn't mean posting on social media. It means defending it in person to the actual people who make decisions, while your art teacher live tweets it internally for her own amusement. The trade-offs are economic and infrastructural. Silver City is remote. The nearest commercial airport is in El Paso, 3 hours away. Medical care beyond basic services requires driving to Albuquerque or Tucson. According to the New Mexico Department of Health, Grant Regional Health Center handles emergencies, but serious trauma gets helicoptered out. You're betting on staying healthy and solving relevant in a place where neither is easy. The summer monsoon season brings flash floods through the historic downtown because the town is built in an arroyo. The town just accepts this. They have flood protocols, sandbag stations, and a collective shrug about building a town in a drainage channel. That's the Silver City mentality. We know this is imperfect, we're doing it anyway, and we'll all help clean up when it floods again. If Silver City felt like everyone knowing your business through economic overlap, our next town makes that look spacious. We're heading to Missouri wine country, where they remember what your ancestors drank in 1847. Location number 4, Hermann, Missouri. Generational knowledge. Hermann, Missouri, population 2,100, sits on the Missouri River Bluffs 90 minutes west of St. Louis, looking exactly like a German village that got lost on the way to Bavaria and decided the Midwest was close enough. This is heritage tourism country where the town's German roots aren't just preserved, they're performed daily. Half-timbered buildings, wineries operating since the 1840s, and a Wurstfest every March where everyone pretends they're still in the 1850s and nobody finds this strange. Here's what separates Hermann from every town we've visited so far. Generational knowledge. This isn't a place where people know you. This is a place where people know your family tree going back to 1837 when German immigrants founded the town as a new Germany to preserve German culture. If your family's been here for 3 generations, locals know your great-grandfather's business, which branch of the family feuded over land in 1962, and that your Aunt Clara was difficult but made excellent strudel. The social structure operates on layered belonging. First tier, families who've been here since founding, roughly 150 years. These are the Huysmans, the Hermans, the Poping families whose names are on wineries, streets, and historical plaques. Second tier, families who arrived in the early 1900s, less prestigious but still established. Third tier, post-World War II arrivals who've been here 70 plus years and still get treated as relatively recent. Fourth tier, anyone who moved here after 1980, permanent outsiders no matter how long they stay. One local described it perfectly. My family's been in Hermann since 1952. That's 72 years. I'm still introduced as John. He's from the family that bought the old Muller place. Not my family, my grandfather's transaction. That's how long memory runs here. Median home price is $198,000 according to Zillow data from December 2024. Shockingly affordable for a town with functioning tourism economy and proximity to St. Louis. Days on market average 89 days, indicating slower turnover but steady interest. The cost of living index is 86, well below national average because outside of tourist season nobody's charging tourist prices and the locals would riot if they tried. The economy here is wine, tourism, and whatever remains of small manufacturing. Hermann has 11 active wineries within city limits, serving a town of 2,100 people. That's one winery for every 191 residents. According to the Hermann Chamber of Commerce, tourism brings 350,000 visitors annually, mostly for Mayfest, Wurstfest, and Oktoberfest, the holy trinity of excuse-to-drink wine festivals. The median household income is $51,600, 14% below national median, but locals supplement through tourism-related side hustles during festival season. The social fabric operates through church affiliation, festival participation, and winery employment. If you're not Catholic or Lutheran, you're socially adrift because those are the two churches that matter, and they've been competing for influence since 1838. Festival participation is mandatory social signaling. Missing Oktoberfest without a documented medical emergency is grounds for permanent suspicion, and if you work at a winery, you're automatically integrated into the gossip network because servers hear everything and share generously. Fun fact, Hermann was designed as a specifically German utopian colony to preserve German language and culture in America. English wasn't widely spoken here until the 1920s when anti-German sentiment during World War I forced linguistic assimilation. The resentment about that forced assimilation still simmers in certain old-timer conversations. You're witnessing 100-year-old cultural grudges playing out in real time. Picture this, Sunday afternoon at Stonehill Winery, the largest and oldest continuously operating winery in Hermann. You're at a tasting and the server recognizes you from church. She mentions that her grandmother went to school with your landlord's mother, and apparently there was some drama involving a piano recital in 1956 that still gets referenced. Another customer overhears, chimes in that his family used to own the building your apartment is in before selling it in 1978, and he has opinions about how the new owners maintain it. You realize that your rental history is public knowledge and has been analyzed by people who have institutional memory history going back to before your parents were born. The trade-offs here are insularity and limited economic mobility. Herman is gorgeous, functional, and affordable. It's also a place where your social standing is determined by factors you can't control. When your family arrived, which church they joined, and whether you pronounce German words correctly at Oktoberfest. According to census data, the population has been essentially flat since 1960, hovering between 2,100 and 2,400. Growth isn't the goal, preservation is. You're buying into a living museum where you'll always be a guest curator, never the permanent collection. The job market is tourism, wine production, retail, or commuting to St. Louis for better pay. Unemployment sits at 3.4% according to Missouri Department of Labor data, but that's partly because people leave if they can't find work. The ones who stay are the ones who either have generational ties or have made peace with being permanent outsiders who happen to own property here. At least Herman has paved roads and cell service. Our next stop has those things technically, but uses them differently. We're heading to West Texas where the art world meets ranching culture and everyone knows everyone's business despite pretending they don't. Location number 3, Marfa, Texas. The Fishbowl. Marfa, Texas, population 1,700, sits in the high desert 60 miles north of the Mexican border, where the landscape is so flat and empty that minimalist artist Donald Judd saw it and thought, finally, somewhere as stark as my aesthetic. In 1971, Judd moved to Marfa, bought most of downtown, and transformed abandoned military buildings into art installations. His foundation still controls significant real estate. His ghost still controls the cultural conversation. Here's what makes Marfa different from every place we visited. It's two separate communities forced to coexist in 1.6 square miles. There's ranching Marfa, generational families who've been here since the 1880s when the railroad came through. Then there's art Marfa, the transplants who arrived post-Judd to make conceptual installations and drink expensive coffee. These two groups don't particularly like each other. They absolutely know everything about each other. The social dynamic is fishbowl observation. In a town of 1,700 where downtown is 6 blocks and there's one grocery store, you can't avoid anyone. The ranchers watch the artists watch the ranchers. Both groups watch the tourists who arrive to see the Marfa lights, a natural atmospheric phenomenon that gets mythologized because Marfa needs tourist dollars, and mysterious lights sell better than refracted headlights. One longtime resident described it perfectly. Marfa is small enough that your business is everyone's business, but fragmented enough that everyone interprets your business differently. The ranchers think the artists are overpaid dilettantes. The artists think the ranchers are backward traditionalists. Both groups know exactly when you're having an affair, they just judge you for different reasons. Median home price is $285,000 according to Zillow data from December 2024. Absurdly high for a remote West Texas town with no major employers, driven entirely by art world money and boutique hotel developers who think Marfa is the next Taos. Days on market average 134 days because buying in Marfa requires either specific artistic ambitions or genuine insanity. The cost of living index is 97, slightly below national average, which is misleading because while housing is expensive, everything else is cheap because you're in the middle of nowhere and luxury goods don't exist. The economy is art, tourism, ranching, and border patrol. According to the Marfa Chamber of Commerce, tourism contributes approximately $26 million annually to the local economy. The Chinati Foundation, Judd's legacy organization, employs around 30 people year-round. Ballroom Marfa, another contemporary art space, employs another dozen. The rest work in hospitality, retail, or they ranch, or they're border patrol agents stationed at the checkpoint 70 miles north. Median household income is $34,500, 51% below the national median. You're not making money in Marfa unless you brought it with you. The social infrastructure operates through cultural fault lines. There's the St. George Hall dances where ranchers gather. There's the gallery openings where artists congregate. There's the Lost Horse Saloon where both groups drink but maintain careful territorial separation, like species sharing a watering hole. According to locals, you can map someone's social alliance by which bathroom they use at the Padres convenience store, the closest thing Marfa has to neutral ground. Fun fact, Marfa was named after a character in Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov Karamazov by a railroad executive's wife who was reading the novel when the town needed a name in 1883. The town is accidentally named after a minor Russian literary character, and nobody here can agree if that's pretentious or perfect. The ranchers think it's ridiculous. The artists think it's destiny. Both groups use it as evidence for their cultural superiority. The geographic isolation is profound. El Paso is 200 miles north. Midland, Odessa is 140 miles northeast. The nearest hospital with comprehensive services is in Alpine, 26 miles away. According to the Texas Department of State Health Services, Big Bend Regional Medical Center in Alpine handles emergencies, but serious trauma requires helicopter transport to larger cities. You're betting on staying healthy or accepting that medical emergencies involve helicopters and significant prayer. Picture this. Friday night at the Capri Bar, you walk in and 3 ranchers at the bar look up, recognize you from the post office, and return to their conversation about cattle prices. 2 artists in the corner booth are arguing about an installation at the Chineti Foundation, and one of them dated your landlord 5 years ago and definitely knows you're 2 weeks late on rent. The bartender knows everyone in this room and could write a comprehensive social map if anyone paid her. The jukebox plays Townes Van Zandt. Everyone knows you're here, who you came with, and approximately how long you'll stay. You haven't been truly anonymous in 6 months, and you're starting to suspect that anonymity is a luxury you bought your way out of when you moved somewhere this small. The trade-offs are isolation, economic fragility, and cultural tension. Marfa is beautiful in a severe, uncompromising way. It's also a place where 2 communities tolerate each other for economic survival while maintaining permanent cultural warfare. You'll know everyone. You'll belong to a faction whether you choose one or get assigned, and the town will know everything about your life because there's nothing else to pay attention to when you're surrounded by 300 miles of desert in every direction. If Marfa felt like living in a fishbowl with factions, our next location eliminates the factions and the privacy. We're heading to Alaska where your neighbors know when you flush the toilet. Part 8. Location number 2. Halibut Cove, Alaska. Location number 2, Halibut Cove, Alaska. Mandatory intimacy. Halibut Cove, Alaska has a year-round population of around 35 people that swells to approximately 76 in summer when the artists return and the seasonal workers arrive to run the one restaurant. This isn't a town in any traditional sense. It's a collection of houses and art studios connected by a mile-long boardwalk on the shores of Kachemak Bay, accessible only by boat from Homer, which itself is the end of the road on the Kenai Peninsula. There are no cars in Halibut Cove because there are no roads. There are no roads because the entire community exists on pilings above the tidal zone. You walk everywhere or you take your personal skiff. Here's the fundamental reality of Halibut Cove. Physical proximity creates mandatory social intimacy. Your neighbor isn't just next door. Your neighbor is 30 feet away across water. And in the winter when ice forms, you can hear every conversation, every argument, every time they slam a door. The boardwalk is single file. When you leave your house, everyone sees you leave. When you come back, everyone knows you're back. Your comings and goings are observable data, not because anyone's surveilling you, but because visibility is the default setting in a community this small on a structure this narrow. According to the Halibut Cove Experience, the volunteer organization that manages community affairs, since there's no formal municipal government, the year-round population has remained stable at around 35 people for the past 20 years. These are artists, commercial fishermen, ecotourism operators, and people who've chosen radical isolation from mainland social structures. The summer population increased to 76 brings artists renting studios, workers at the Sultry restaurant, and occasional wilderness guides. But the core 35 are the ones who winter here when the ferry stops running daily and you're genuinely cut off. Property ownership in Halibut Cove is complicated. Most land is leased from Alaska Native corporations or held through complex historical claims. According to Alaska Department of Natural Resources records, assessed property values range from $200,000 to $800,000 depending on size and water access. But market sales are rare because nobody's selling. When properties do change hands, it's usually within existing community networks. You don't buy into Halibut Cove. You get invited, probationed, and eventually accepted if you survive a winter without losing your mind. The economy is art sales, commercial fishing, and ecotourism. The Sultry restaurant operates from May to September, serving upscale seafood to tourists who take the ferry from Homer for the experience of dining in a floating art colony. According to the restaurant's owner in a 2023 interview with Alaska Magazine, they serve approximately 5,000 guests per summer season. Artists run galleries from their studios, selling to the same tourist base. Commercial fishermen work halibut and salmon seasons. There are no other jobs. Median household income data doesn't exist because the population is too small for Census Bureau reporting, but locals estimate most households earn between $30,000 and $60,000 annually through combined seasonal work. The social fabric operates through necessity and proximity. There's a community sauna that everyone shares. There's a small schoolhouse for the handful of children, operated by parents on a rotating basis. There's a community dock where the mailboat arrives 3 times a week in summer, once a week in winter. Everything is communal because nothing else makes sense when you're 35 people living on a boardwalk with no roads out. One resident told a visiting journalist, "In Halibut Cove, you know when your neighbor is having a rough morning because you can hear them making coffee. You know when they're fighting with their spouse because sound carries over water. You know when they're sick because you notice they didn't walk to the dock." Privacy isn't something you have, it's something you pretend to give each other as a courtesy. Picture this, January in Halibut Cove. It's 4:30 p.m. and already dark. You walk the boardwalk to the community dock to check if the mailboat came. The temperature is 28 degrees and the wind off the bay is relentless. You see lights on in 4 houses. You know exactly who's home and who's not because there are only 10 occupied houses right now and you've been watching the same patterns for 4 months. You retrieve your mail, 1 package and 2 letters, and on the walk back, you pass Sarah, who mentions she saw you walking at 2 a.m. last week and wants to make sure you're sleeping okay. You haven't been truly alone since October and won't be until the tourists arrive in May to dilute the intimacy with temporary anonymity. The trade-offs are environmental and psychological. Winters are dark, cold, and isolating in ways that test mental stability. According to Alaska Department of Health data, seasonal affective disorder rates in remote coastal communities are 3 times the national average. Supplies come by boat or plane. Medical emergencies require a skiff to Homer and then a drive or flight to Anchorage. You're hours away from comprehensive medical care in good weather, potentially days in bad weather. The community self-selects for people who either thrive on radical intimacy or have run from something on the mainland that makes isolation preferable. There's no judgment in that observation. It's just the demographic reality of a place where surviving winter requires either exceptional mental fortitude or exceptional motivation to stay hidden, even though hiding is physically impossible. At least in Halibut Cove, you can take a boat to Homer if you need a break from being known. Our final stop doesn't have that option. We're heading 8 miles down into the Grand Canyon to a place where anonymity literally doesn't exist and the postmaster is definitely your cousin. Location number 1, Supai, Arizona, inescapable lineage. Supai, Arizona is the capital of the Havasupai Indian Reservation. Population somewhere between 200 and 450 depending on seasonal census and who's currently living on the rim versus in the canyon. This is the most remote community in the lower 48 states, accessible only by an 8-mile trail from the rim by helicopter or by mule. There are no roads in, there are no roads out. The mail still arrives by mule train, making the Supai post office the last mule-delivered mail route in America. Your mail carrier is probably related to you. Here's the fundamental reality of Supai. This is a tribal community where everyone is Havasupai, connected by blood or marriage, and anonymity is not just impractical but culturally impossible. The Havasupai tribe has approximately 730 enrolled members, roughly 200 to 450 live in Supai year-round, with others living on the rim or in Flagstaff for work or education. But even the members who live elsewhere maintain family ties, return for ceremonies, and remain embedded in the kinship networks that govern social life. This isn't a town where you move to be known. This is a sovereign nation where belonging is determined by tribal enrollment, family lineage, and participation in community structures that predate the United States by centuries. Non-tribal members can visit as tourists hiking to Havasu Falls, but living here requires tribal affiliation. You're not buying into Supai. You're born into it or you marry into it, and even then your integration depends on family acceptance and community consensus. The physical isolation is profound. Supai sits at the bottom of a side canyon off the main Grand Canyon, elevation 3,195 feet, surrounded by walls rising 2,000 feet on all sides. The temperature in summer hits 110 degrees Fahrenheit. The trail is the only access point for most people. 8 miles of switchbacks and exposed hiking. Helicopters run supplies and emergency evacuations, but they're expensive and weather dependent. According to the Havasupai tribe's tourism website, approximately 30,000 tourists visit annually to see Havasu Falls, but they pass through without staying in the village proper. The economy is tourism and government services. The tribe operates a campground and lodge for tourists visiting the waterfalls. Tourism revenue supports tribal operations, healthcare, education, and infrastructure. The Supai post office employs several people. The school serves about 50 students K-8. The health clinic is staffed by Indian health service providers. According to tribal council reports, unemployment within the reservation is approximately 30 to 40%, but traditional employment metrics don't capture subsistence activities or seasonal tourism work. Median household income data is not publicly available, but poverty rates on the reservation are estimated at 40 to 50% based on regional tribal averages. The social fabric operates through kinship networks, clan affiliations, and ceremonial participation. Everyone knows how everyone else is related. Family disputes become community issues because the community is literally one extended family. According to anthropological studies of the Havasupai, clan membership determines ceremonial roles, land access, and social obligations. Your reputation isn't individual, it's inherited and maintained through generations. One aspect that outsiders consistently misunderstand: Supai is not a tourist attraction. It's a living community that tolerates tourism for economic survival. The Havasupai have lived in this canyon for at least 800 years. They're not performing culture for visitors. They're maintaining it despite visitors. The village has a school, a post office, a community center, a church, and all the infrastructure of any other town, just scaled for 200 to 450 people and delivered by mule. The environmental challenges are significant. Flash floods are a constant threat. In 2008, a flash flood destroyed parts of the campground and reshaped the creek system. According to NOAA data, the canyon receives most precipitation during monsoon season, July through September, when sudden storms can turn dry washes into torrents within minutes. The tribe has early warning systems and evacuation protocols because flooding isn't a possibility, it's a certainty. Medical care is limited to the Indian Health Service clinic in the village. Serious medical emergencies require helicopter evacuation to Flagstaff, weather permitting. According to IHS service reports, the clinic handles basic care, urgent care, and dental services, but complex procedures, surgeries, or trauma require transfer. You're betting on staying healthy or accepting that medical crisis involves waiting for a helicopter that might not be able to fly if storms are rolling in. Picture this: Tuesday afternoon in Supai. You walk to the post office to pick up a package that arrived by mule this morning. The postmaster is your second cousin. She mentions that your aunt saw you hiking out to the falls last week instead of attending the community meeting, and people noticed. Another customer in line is your grandmother's sister, and she wants to know if you're coming to the gathering this weekend because your absence last month was discussed. You realize that your movements, your choices, your participation in community life are all observed, recorded, and evaluated by people who've known your family for generations and will know your children's children. There is no such thing as a fresh start here. There is no such thing as anonymity. There's only the ongoing negotiation of your place within a social network that predates your existence and will continue long after you're gone. The trade-offs aren't trade-offs if you're Havasupai. This is home. This is lineage. This is the place your ancestors defended, survived, and maintained for 800 plus years despite federal policies designed to erase tribal sovereignty. But if you're considering whether small-town community is worth the loss of privacy, Supai is the ultimate case study. This is what total social transparency looks like when it's built on kinship, geography, and cultural continuity. Everyone knows your name because everyone knows your grandmother's name and your great-grandfather's name and how your family fits into the collective whole. There's nowhere more remote in the continental United States. There's nowhere with deeper community ties, and there's absolutely nowhere you can hide from being known. So here's what we found: 8 American towns where your name isn't just known, it's attached to your family history, your civic participation, your economic struggles, and that thing you did last Thursday that someone's still talking about. From Beaufort, where recognition feels like care, to Supai, where your lineage is public record, the pattern is consistent. Community costs privacy, belonging requires transparency. The smaller the population, the higher the price of admission. Beaufort gave you Southern hospitality with plausible deniability. Red Lodge gave you winter survival networks. Northfield gave you civic mythology and college town energy. Silver City gave you role overlap and economic visibility. Hermon gave you generational memory and German festivals. Marfa gave you factional fishbowl observation. Halibut Cove gave you boardwalk intimacy where everyone hears everything. And Supai gave you the endpoint, a place where anonymity doesn't exist because the community is literally one extended family maintaining 800 years of continuity. The trade-off is universal. You're exchanging urban isolation for small town integration, and integration means your life becomes community property. Your comings and goings are observed, your opinions are recorded, your struggles are known, your successes are celebrated by people who also know about your failures. The person who remembers your coffee order also remembers that you missed the fundraiser, skipped the meeting, and haven't been to church in 3 weeks. If you're lonely in a city where your dentist doesn't remember your name, these towns offer the opposite problem. You'll never be lonely. You'll also never be alone. The barista knows your order, the librarian knows your reading habits, and the postmaster knows you're late on your water bill. Community isn't a marketing term here. It's infrastructure. It's survival. It's the social contract you sign when you move somewhere small enough that everyone matters because there's nobody else. If this sounds like what you've been missing, pick your poison based on what you're willing to trade. Want affordability with Southern charm? Beaufort. Want mountain survival culture? Red Lodge. Want college town civic pride? Northfield. Want arts colony economic scrambling? Silver City. Want generational German tradition? Herman. Want cultural faction warfare? Marfa. Want literal fishbowl living? Halibut Cove. Want to disappear into a kinship network at the bottom of the Grand Canyon? Supai is waiting, but you better be prepared to become family. If you enjoyed watching the population numbers drop and the intimacy levels skyrocket, hit that like button. If you're already planning your escape from urban anonymity, drop a comment with which town you'd pick and what you're willing to trade for it. Subscribe for more countdowns about American places that still work differently than the algorithm thinks they should. Share this with anyone who's ever complained that nobody knows their neighbors anymore, and then watch them realize that knowing your neighbors means they also know everything about you. We're done here.